Well, Hayley from Leeds is asking our MPs a question this week. She's thought to be the first person in the UK to have been made bankrupt because of the cladding crisis. Now, we'll get Hayley's response to the MPs in a moment, but first, here's her story.
It's a huge deal. It is life-changing, life-ruining. I used to live in Leeds city centre. I used to be a homeowner. I used to be happy, really, and now I'm bankrupt because of historic fire safety defects that had nothing to do with me, but apparently have cost me literally everything that I've ever owned. I was told that my flat was unsafe. I was told if we didn't get waking watch, we would have to leave, we'd have to evacuate, we could no longer live in the building. So I had to pay waking watch every single month on top of my other bills. Then the service charge increased, the building's insurance increased. We had to get a new boiler to try and counteract the building's insurance. We had to pay a fire alarm. We had to pay for a cladding consultation fee. This was all in a very short amount of time. And for me, I didn't have enough money. I ran out of time, ran out of money, and I'm not the only one. I went bankrupt on the 7th of December, so as you can imagine, Christmas, bankrupt, homeless, had to move out of my flat. It's the most horrendous. I just feel like a failure, and my life has been ruined or delayed, and it just had nothing to do with me. The building and the construction of it and all the decisions to do with it had nothing to do with me, but I'm the one sat ruined. It didn't make any sense. So firstly, I actually want to say a quick thank you because I know that they've signed the McPartland-Smith amendment, which would go toward protecting leaseholders from the cost of fire safety defect. Although, Nick, some of your Conservative colleagues haven't signed it yet, so all eyes are on them. My question is, what immediate measures are you going to put into law that will protect every single leaseholder from historic and from future costs as a result of the construction industry's negligence and as a result of the government's poor building regulation changes?
Hayley, thanks for that. We'll get your reaction to what the MPs have to say in a moment. Some big developments potentially on this issue this week, with the government pledged to spend £3.5 billion to remove unsafe cladding. We'll talk about that in a moment. But on Hayley's specific question, Stephanie Peacock, what more could be put into law to protect leaseholders?
Well, I just wanted to begin by saying how very sorry I am for what Hayley's been through. I remember reading a story a few weeks ago in the paper, and my heart really goes out to her. And the point is that she's not to blame, and leaseholders have been put in a terrible position. They've throughout no fault of their own. They've saved, they've bought a house, and now they're trapped in it with huge bills and devastating consequences. And I think what we really need now is immediate action. It is 3.5 years since the tragic Grenfell fire. And we still haven't got action. We've still got hundreds of thousands of people living in dangerous accommodation. The Labour Party have said we want to see a cladding task force set up, which is based on the Australian model. And we also want to see immediate funding put in place to remove this dangerous cladding and a timescale that's legally enforceable. There have been 2 votes in the House of Commons in the last 6 months on this, and we really can't wait any longer.
Nick Fletcher, this is a national scandal, isn't it? I mean, Hayley, you've just heard, was made bankrupt. There are many more in her position. Do you really think the government gets this?
Yeah, I think they do, and I think the events this week have obviously proven that. I think the package that the Secretary of State, Robert Jenrick, put forward this week was hugely helpful to this issue. It's the largest package that's been put together to help within the housing sector, and I think the government really do understand the issue. I would just like to say that it's obviously hugely distressing for Hayley, and my heart really does go out to her. It's a terrible situation for anybody to be in. She's done the right thing. It's something that this Conservative Party encourages for people to buy their own homes, and it should be a wonderful part of your life to buy your own home and to move into it. And for it to end like this, as I say, my heart really does go out to her.
Yeah, but you talk about the package of measures there. those living in smaller blocks below 18 metres will only be entitled to loans. They can pay them back at £50 a month to remove flammable cladding. But when you look at some of the costs involved, they're going to be paying those loans out probably for the rest of their natural lives.
Yeah, I think people need to understand that the loan would actually stay with the building rather than a loan taken by an individual. So in all fairness, it will become part of the service charge, and they've capped that at £50 a month now. I know £50 a month is an awful lot of money, but with the amount of work that is required up and down the country, I think this is a proportionate compromise for the amount of work that is required.
But in terms of Hayley's question, I mean, she asked, should there be measures put into law to protect leaseholders? Now some Conservatives have supported this amendment, but not that many. So how would you persuade your colleagues to back that?
Well, I think it'd be a little disingenuous for me to sit here and say that that I've not removed my name from that amendment, because I did put my name to the amendment. And when the government came with the package this week, I studied the package, I debated it with colleagues, and I do believe that it is a proportionate compromise in the situation that we're in. And I do believe it goes an awful long way. Every dwelling that's above 18 metres gets the cladding removed, and there's no cost to leaseholders whatsoever. And those between 11 and 18 metres, as I say, there's a charge that's going on to the service charge, but the cladding still gets removed, and it puts the value back into the properties, which is what I really wanted. And I wanted people to feel safe and be safe in the buildings that are in these height restrictions. So I do believe that the government has at this point has definitely gone more than what I expected them to do, and I'm really pleased with the outcome. And I do feel as though I've been part of that as well, which is, as I say, I'm really pleased with what they've done.
Well, one of your Conservative colleagues had his head in his hands, he said, when the announcement was made. But I mean, Stephanie Peacock, you were shaking your head there.
Yeah, I just don't think it goes far enough. And it's not acceptable to say, oh, well, if you live in one that's under 18 metres, you can take a loan out. The government said that leaseholders wouldn't be responsible for paying it. £50 a month is a huge amount of money, and it won't put the value back in. We know people will find it very difficult to sell their houses and to move on. And the government have made commitments and they've simply not delivered on them.
You accept that, Nick Fletcher, where people have bought flats in buildings which is deemed to have potentially dangerous cladding, it's a worthless investment?
No, because the cladding will be removed, and the government, as part of this package, have been speaking with mortgage lenders and with insurance companies to make sure that the value is reinstated into these buildings.
Well, Hayley was listening to that. Hayley, what did you make of those responses?
I can't believe what I've just heard. I think I'm going to be sick.
Why?
So thanks, Nick, for saying you feel for me. That's going to really make a difference. Cheers. And sorry, I think I'm going to be sick.
You said in your VT that he'd put his name to this amendment protecting leaseholders, but then he said he'd taken his name off the amendment because he was happy with the government's package of measures this week.
Well, I'd just like to say riddle be this, Nick. You've been very careful, and Robert Jenrick has, to say that this money is solely for cladding, for the removal of cladding. So I assume that you know how expensive even scaffolding is for a building of over 18 metres, millions. And obviously, when you take this cladding off, it's the issues underneath. So these people are going to get not just, oh, your cladding's free, great. What about the cavity barriers and the missing fire breaks and the flammable combustible insulation? What about the timber balconies? What about the external brickwork problems? What about the missing compartmentation? We've all got these problems. Nobody's just got cladding and that's it, hardly any of them. And if you think freeholders are going to have someone up scaffolding just to do the cladding, then come back down again, they're not. They're going to do it all at once. We're going to get these bills for all of these things all at once. It's going to be thousands and thousands of pounds, and you're going to bankrupt most of my neighbours. Thanks a lot. That's great. Cheers.
Do you give the government at least some credit for this £3.5 billion package of measures announced this week?
That is a nice step forward, and we are obviously, yeah, that is a bit closer. Thank you. We're a bit pleased by that. But the fact is, when they announced the 1.6 billion, we applied for the funding, and during the application process, you have to get an inspection done, a tender done, you have to get your building inspected, and that's why we know about the cavity barriers, the insulation, the this, that and the other. And now, so do the government. We've submitted all of this data in these application forms. The government have read it and thought, whoa, this is going to be expensive. Then they've been very careful to offer this 5 billion, which is a third of what we need. And they've been very careful to just say the word cladding, just the removal of cladding, 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 cladding. And it's going to make no difference. We're going to go bankrupt. Mortgage lenders are going to be lumbered with this, and it's going to be a complete mess. And if you think this isn't going to be a domino effect and will take out the bottom rung of the housing ladder, then I give up.
Hayley, I have a feeling we haven't heard the last of you, but listen, I know you've had a truly rotten time in recent years, but we really appreciate you telling your story to us here on Politics North.
Thanks so much. Cheers.